A dark lake hides more than just water in its silent depths. That instinctive chill you feel is the very reason rivers and lakes became home to mythology's most feared creatures. From the shadowy Bunyip in Australian billabongs to the polite but deadly Kappa in Japanese streams, these beings are born from a universal human experience. By the end of this, you will understand the hidden blueprint behind every water monster legend, seeing these stories not as random fears, but as a profound map of human psychology, survival, and our relationship with nature itself. We will uncover why still swamps breed different horrors than rushing rivers, and how a story about a creature might actually be about protecting an entire ecosystem. What is it about water that perfectly mirrors our deepest anxieties? Our own reflection stares back from the still surface of a lake, a perfect, familiar image. But lean closer, peer past that thin mirror. Below lies a world that rejects light and defies our senses, a realm of profound silence and crushing pressure where our bodies are not built to survive. This is the heart of the terror. Water represents the ultimate liminal space, a tangible threshold between our solid, sunlit world and a formless, alien abyss. We are creatures of the known, yet we are irresistibly drawn to the edge of this liquid unknown, a place where vision fails and gravity seems negotiable. It triggers a deep-seated psychological response, sometimes called horror vacui, the fear of emptiness. The human mind cannot while one misstep into a deep current can end a life. A river brings fertile silt for crops in the spring, then washes away entire homes in a summer flood. This duality, this life and death ambivalence is etched into the human soul. We do not simply fear the water, we hold it in awe, and when something is both vital and violently unpredictable, the human mind seeks to negotiate with it. We give the danger a face and a name, transforming an impersonal force of nature into a being with desires, a temper, and rules. This is the birth of the capricious water deity, the spirit that must be respected and appeased. Think of the powerful river gods of ancient Rome like Tibrinus, to whom offerings were made for safe passage, or the naiads of Greek myth, beautiful nymphs of freshwater springs and streams who could be benevolent guides or, if offended, bring drought or madness. Mythologist Joseph Campbell spoke of threshold guardians in the hero's journey, powerful beings that block the way and test the worth of those who would enter a new realm. What is a treacherous river crossing or the mouth of a mysterious cave spring, if not the ultimate threshold? The monsters that dwell there become the guardians of the resource itself. For a community living by an unpredictable river, a sudden flood wasn't just bad weather, it was the wrath of the river spirit. A waterborne illness that swept through the village wasn't a matter of unseen bacteria. It was the poisonous breath of a creature lurking in the shallows. We see this personification of aquatic chaos at the very dawn of recorded myth. In the Mesopotamian Enuma Elish, the world begins with two primordial waters, the chaotic, saltwater goddess Tiamat and the fresh, sweet waters of Apsu. Even creation itself emerges from a conflict between these opposing aquatic forces. This deep-seated understanding that life and chaos flow from the same source makes the water's edge the perfect symbolic home for beings that embody this terrifying tension. They are not merely predators, they are the manifest consequence of taking the gift of life for granted. This need to negotiate with the life-giving water gave rise to the first and perhaps most compelling type of water monster, the guardian of the threshold. These are not mere predators lurking in the reeds, they are sentinels with a purpose. They exist to protect something sacred, be it forbidden knowledge, a spiritual gateway, or simply the sovereignty of the wild itself. When a hero in a story approaches a treacherous lake or a swirling whirlpool, the creature that rises from it is often less a random encounter and more a deliberate test. It asks a fundamental question: who are you to cross this line? The legendary Hydra of Greek myth offers a perfect case study. It did not live in just any swamp. It dwelled in the springs of Lake Lerna, which was believed to be an entrance to the underworld. The Hydra was more than a beast with many heads. It was the guardian of that ultimate threshold between the world of the living and the dead. Its most terrifying trait, the regeneration of 2 heads for every one cut off, was a brilliant metaphor for the relentless, multiplying challenges of a swamp, where solving one problem like clearing a path often creates 2 new ones. Defeating it required more than brute force. It required cunning, a change in tactics symbolized by the fire that cauterized the wounds. This archetype appears across the globe. In Slavic folklore, the Vodianoi was a grumpy, ancient spirit who ruled over rivers and mills. He was not inherently evil, but he was fiercely protective of his domain. Fishermen and millers would offer him small gifts of tobacco or a sacrificed animal to secure his favor. Those who were disrespectful, who polluted the water or boasted too loudly, might find themselves pulled into the depths. The Vodianoi enforced a code of conduct, a reminder that humans were guests in his aquatic kingdom. These stories transformed geography into narrative. A simple river crossing is no longer just a physical challenge. It becomes a spiritual ordeal. The monster serves as the personification of the natural world's right to remain wild and untamed, a sovereign entity that must be acknowledged, respected, and sometimes outsmarted. By placing a guardian at the water's edge, ancient storytellers were mapping human concepts of boundaries, worthiness, and sacred law directly onto the landscape. The journey could not continue until the hero proved they understood the rules of this other realm, and the type of challenge they faced was profoundly shaped by the very nature of the water they sought to cross. The geography of fear is not arbitrary. The very nature of the water itself, whether still or rushing, writes the first draft of the monster's story. A stagnant bog and a thundering rapid speak to different parts of the human psyche, and the creatures born from them are perfect reflections of their environment. Consider the still, silent waters of a swamp or a deep, murky lake. Here, the terror is one of stealth and corruption. The water does not move to warn you, it simply waits. It is opaque, hiding everything beneath a surface that might only ripple with the slow release of decay gases from the bottom. This is a realm of poison, rot, and patient ambush. The monsters that inhabit these places are masters of deception and insidious harm. Take the Uisge of Scottish folklore, a waterhorse far more dangerous than its river-dwelling cousin, the Kelpie. While a Kelpie might trick you onto its back in a rushing stream, the Uisge prefers still, deep lochs. Its shape-shifting deception is more calculated, its hunger more vicious. It is a creature of the quiet, deep place where screams are muffled and disappearance is absolute. Similarly, in Japan, the Neuroscience is a serpentine woman often found near quiet shores or riverbanks combing her long hair. She is not a creature of dramatic force, but of eerie, unsettling allure that masks a deadly nature. These beings embody the slow, creeping dread of contamination and the horror of being pulled into a silent, consuming mire. Their power is not in noise, but in the awful, sudden breach of the silence. Now, contrast this with the roaring chaos of a fast-moving river or a churning rapid. Here, the danger is immediate, loud, and overwhelmingly physical. You cannot mistake the power of the current. The monster born here is not a stealthy poisoner, but a spirit of raw, untamed force. It is the embodiment of the current that can sweep a strong swimmer away, the undertow that never lets go. In Norse mythology, the Fossagrim is a river spirit, a talented fiddler whose music echoes the sound of rushing water. To learn his art or to ensure safe passage across his domain, one must offer him a sacrifice, often a piece of meat tossed into the current on a Thursday. He is not inherently malicious, but he is a personification of the river's capricious power, a force that must be respectfully acknowledged. Across many cultures, from the mountainous regions of Asia to the great river basins of Africa, folklore speaks of river demons or spirits that are not individuals so much as they are the conscious will of the drowning current itself. Their attribute is overwhelming strength, a chaotic energy that mirrors the tumult of the water. This is environmental determinism shaping our deepest stories. The unsettling quiet of the swamp allows for the jump scare horror, the thing that grabs you from below without a sound. The roaring river suggests an inescapable, deafening power that simply erases you. The local terrain, with all its very real dangers from waterborne parasites in still pools to deadly hydraulics in whitewater, directly authors the monster's attributes. By understanding this geographical typology, we see these myths as more than random spooky tales. They are a coded survival guide, a way of mapping the specific personality of a local hazard onto a memorable, cautionary figure. This deep environmental imprint is what allows the fear to be passed down, transforming a personal moment of terror into a shared cultural memory, ready to be activated the next time someone stands at the water's edge, listening to either the silence or the roar. But what if the face we gave to the fear was once a real face looking back at us? The stories feel timeless, yet they are passed through countless generations, each retelling a gentle erosion of fact and an embellishment of wonder. This leads to a provocative idea that the oldest water monster myths might be cultural fossils, preserving a distorted memory of a real encounter between our ancestors and creatures that have long since vanished from the earth. It is the theory that myth can sometimes be a form of paleontology. Consider the most famous modern example, the long neck and humped back often described in sightings of creatures like the Loch Ness Monster. That silhouette is uncannily reminiscent of a plesiosaur, a marine reptile from the age of dinosaurs. While mainstream science dismisses the survival of such animals, the visual echo is powerful, igniting endless debate and wonder. It shows how a compelling image, once seeded in the cultural imagination, can persist and adapt, searching for a home in the modern world. Yet more grounded and fascinating examples lie in the deeper past. Take the Bunyip, a being from Australian Aboriginal lore that dwells in billabongs and swamps. Descriptions of the Bunyip vary from tribe to tribe, but many accounts mention a shaggy, dog-like face, a tail, flippers, and tusks or horns. To a paleontologist, this collage of features sounds strikingly like a description of the Diprotodon, a giant wombat-like marsupial the size of a rhinoceros that lived near water and went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. Could the ancestral memory of encountering this massive, unfamiliar animal at the water's edge have been woven into the enduring tapestry of the Bunyip story? It is a compelling possibility. Even encounters with animals that still exist but were unfamiliar to newly arriving peoples could have sparked legendary beings. The first humans to explore the rivers of the Amazon or the Congo, encountering a massive anaconda or a crocodile for the very first time, would have had no modern framework for such a creature. Through generations of retelling, amplified by fear and the natural exaggeration of oral tradition, a large, dangerous reptile could easily evolve into a divine serpent or a demonic guardian of the river. This perspective does not diminish the myths, it deepens them. It suggests our oldest stories are a palimpsest, a manuscript where the faint, factual imprint of a real ecological experience is still visible beneath the layers of symbolic meaning and supernatural awe. The monster becomes a bridge, not just between the known and unknown world, but between our present imagination and a tangible, lost past. It transforms the tale from pure fantasy into a potential echo of a shared biological history, a story that began not with a dream, but with a genuine, awe-struck moment at the water's edge, forever fossilized in folklore. And if a story can explain a forgotten animal, what else might it be trying to clarify? A child vanishes by the loch. A fisherman fails to return home. A calm patch of river suddenly boils into a fatal whirlpool. For our ancestors, these were not random accidents in a world governed by impersonal physics. They were events with intention, and that intention required a face. Before the language of undertows, waterborne pathogens, or unstable substrates, the world spoke in the language of agency. Something had to be responsible, and so the monster was born not merely to frighten but to explain. It was the first draft of a cause and effect manual for a dangerous and mysterious world. Take the Celtic Kelpie, a creature of such chilling narrative efficiency. In a landscape dotted with deep, cold lochs, childhood drownings were a tragic reality. The sudden, inexplicable nature of such a loss is a trauma that demands a story. The Kelpie provided one. It wasn't that a child simply slipped and the cold water took them. No, a beautiful, seemingly lost horse appeared by the shore. The child, with compassion or curiosity, climbed onto its back. Only then did the creature reveal its true nature, galloping into the depths and dragging its victim down. This myth does more than warn children to stay away from the water's edge. It gives a reason for the unreasonable. It transforms a senseless tragedy into a narrative with a villain, a sequence of events, and even a moral about deceptive appearances. The grief is given a shape to blame, a story to contain the chaos of loss. This explanatory function extends to the very atmosphere of a place. A stretch of river where someone met a tragic end often feels different, heavy with a silence that feels like a presence. Germanic and Slavic folklore gave that feeling a name, the Nixie or the Rusalka. These were often spirits of women who had met their end in the water, now existing in a state between sorrow and malice. Their haunting songs or weeping from the reeds explained why a particular bend in the river felt so unnerving. It wasn't just imagination, it was the residue of a story, a spiritual memory tied to the landscape. The myth rationalized an emotional and intuitive human response to a site of past hardship, weaving the community's history and its losses directly into the ecology of the place. Even the ground itself could be given a malevolent will. In the peat bogs of Wales, the afanc was a monstrous beast that made its home in lakes and rivers. It was often blamed for flooding, but consider the very nature of a bog. Its surface can appear solid, a deceptively smooth mat of vegetation hiding liquid peat beneath. One misstep and the earth itself seems to swallow a person whole, a slow, terrifying disappearance without a splash. Attributing this to a hungry, muddy creature lurking below makes a terrifyingly passive geological process into an active, avoidable predator. You cannot reason with quicksand, but you can outsmart a beast. You can avoid its lair or perhaps appease it with an offering, and that is the crucial societal function. Once a danger is personified, it can be managed. Rituals emerge. A traveler might whisper a prayer or toss a coin into a whirlpool believed to be the home of a spirit. Certain times of day, like dusk, might be declared taboo for swimming, lest you attract the attention of a creature that rules the night. These practices, born from myth, created a framework of precaution. They offered a semblance of control over the uncontrollable, turning blind fear into a set of actionable rules. This functionalist view reveals these monsters not as mere superstition, but as vital psychological and social tools. They were the keystones in a cultural bridge built across the terrifying gap between the known world and the vast, unpredictable wild. A bridge that allowed a community to live alongside the danger by first giving it a name and a set of rules. The monster is not just in the water, it is in us. If these beings are born from our need to explain the world, then the fears they embody become a kind of psychological fingerprint, revealing the specific anxieties that haunted a culture. Beyond the universal terror of drowning, These creatures carry symbolic cargo, externalizing internal stresses that have little to do with the water itself. They become a canvas upon which a society paints its deepest, most unspoken concerns. Consider the Japanese Kappa, a creature of immense cultural specificity. It is a turtle-like being with a water-filled dent on its head, the source of its power and life. It is obsessed with politeness, bowing so deeply that the water spills from its head, rendering it helpless. It loves cucumbers more than anything. On the surface, this seems like whimsical folklore, but when viewed through a symbolic lens, the Kappa becomes a brilliant manifestation of social anxiety. In a society with highly structured codes of conduct, the fear of committing a fatal breach of etiquette is profound. The Kappa's compulsive bowing ritualizes this fear, turning a social misstep into a literal, physical vulnerability. Its love of cucumbers, often offered as a ritual appeasement, mirrors the use of specific gifts and formalities to navigate complex social hierarchies. The creature is not merely a water demon. It is the terrifying personification of what happens when you forget your manners in a world where politeness is a survival skill. Across the world, in medieval Europe, water took on a different symbolic stain. Here, the fear was not of social failure, but of spiritual corruption. Deep pools and lonely rivers were often seen as gateways to hell, or places where demonic forces gathered. Water demons and malevolent spirits were frequently conflated with heresy and sin. To be pulled beneath the surface by such a being was not just a physical death, it was a descent into damnation, a moral parable about the dangers of straying from the righteous path. The water itself became a metaphor for the seductive, drowning pull of temptation. This externalization of sin served a powerful social function, reinforcing religious orthodoxy by mapping spiritual dangers onto the physical landscape. The symbols become even more intimate when we examine creatures tied to themes of purity and loss. In Slavic lore, the Rusalka is not a simple monster. She is often the spirit of a young woman who died a tragic death, frequently by drowning, sometimes connected to themes of betrayed love or innocence lost. Her haunting song from the riverbank is an echo of profound sorrow, but it also carries a warning about sexual purity and the perils of desire. She represents a collective anxiety about the transition of young women into society, the dangers that awaited them, and the unresolved grief of those who were lost. She is a myth born from heartbreak, her story ensuring that the memory of such losses and the social tensions that surrounded them would never be forgotten by the community. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung might have seen these recurring figures as archetypes, universal patterns emerging from what he called the collective unconscious. More specifically, they often embody the shadow self, the repository of the parts of a culture it represses or fears, its forbidden desires, its violent impulses, its unresolved traumas. By projecting these shadow elements onto a creature in the lake, a society could confront them at a safe distance. The monster becomes a container for everything a culture cannot openly acknowledge about itself. This is why the motifs are so telling: a fear of the other in the form of a scaly river demon, anxiety about children's safety in the child-stealing Kelpie, terror of feminine power in the serpentine Neuroscience. When we learn to read these symbols, the myths transform. They are no longer just cautionary tales about geography. They are profound cultural documents, mirrors held up to the societies that created them. They show us not what was in the water, but what was weighing on the human heart. And if the heart's fears can shape a monster, then perhaps the heart's hopes can shape something else entirely. The water's surface is a fragile boundary between two worlds, and perhaps the most important world it divides is within us. Across countless cultures, water has served as the ultimate symbol for the unconscious mind, for the deep, fluid realm of emotion, memory, and identity that lies beneath our conscious awareness. It is no coincidence, then, that the monsters we place in this element so often embody our deepest fears about transformation and the hidden parts of ourselves we dare not acknowledge. To be pulled beneath the waves by such a creature is more than a physical threat. It is a symbolic descent into the unknown depths of our own psyche. This is where myth becomes a language for internal struggle, using the external landscape of river and lake to map the internal landscape of the human soul. Consider the hauntingly beautiful Selkie legends from the coastal communities of Scotland, Ireland, and Scandinavia. These stories tell of magical beings who are seals in the sea but can shed their skins to walk as humans on land. A human might fall in love with a Selkie in its human form, but to keep it, they must hide or steal its sealskin. Without its skin, the Selkie is trapped, yearning for the ocean, a prisoner of a love that is also a theft. This is not a story about a predator, but about a profound loss of self. The water here represents the Selkie's true nature, its home, its fluid identity. To be severed from that aquatic realm is to be severed from one's core being. The myth speaks to universal anxieties about assimilation, about being forced into a role that suffocates who you truly are, and the deep, melancholic longing that results. The monster in this tale is not the Selkie, but the act of possession that transforms a free being into a captive. This symbolic connection between water and inner transformation takes a darker turn in tales of literal metamorphosis. Stories of humans cursed to become water beasts, like the werewolf legends transposed to a riverbank, reflect a primal fear of degeneration. They explore what happens when we lose control, when our civilized selves are submerged by raging instincts or overwhelming emotions we cannot master. The monstrous change is a physical manifestation of a moral or psychological collapse. To become the creature from the lake is to be consumed by the very chaos the water represents. This idea finds a powerful echo in the concept of the descent. When a hero or a victim is dragged into the murky depths by a water spirit or a beast, mythologists often interpret this as a symbolic journey into the unconscious. It is a confrontation with everything we have repressed, our shadow selves, our buried traumas, or our forbidden desires. The monster becomes the guardian of that inner abyss, and the struggle is not for air but for self-knowledge. These narratives serve as powerful cautionary tales. They warn not just of the physical danger of the water, but of the psychological danger of losing one's bearings. The siren song from the river, the mesmerizing dance of a rusalka, the deceptive calm of a still pond, all these can be read as metaphors for temptations that pull us away from our rational, anchored selves and into emotional or spiritual turmoil. The ultimate horror in these stories is often the loss of identity, of being so transformed by the encounter with the deep, whether through obsession, fear, or enchantment, that you can never fully return to who you were. You are left changed, haunted, adrift. In this light, the water monster is the ultimate agent of chaotic change, a force that tests the integrity of the self. By giving this internal fear an external, aquatic form, ancient storytellers created a memorable framework for discussing the perils of the human condition itself. They crafted tales that resonated on a deeply personal level, teaching that some depths, whether in the landscape or within, are best approached with caution, respect, and a firm sense of who you are. And if these stories could guide an individual's inner journey, they held even greater power to shape the behavior of an entire community. A story that can contain our deepest fears can also be used to shape our daily behavior. This is where the water monster transcends folklore and becomes a tool of governance, an informal legal system written not on stone tablets, but in the compelling language of supernatural terror. Every culture that lived by the water developed a code of conduct for it, and the most effective way to enforce that code was to attach a consequence more vivid than a scolding. Do not swim after dusk, never answer a voice calling your name from the mist, always show respect when you take from the river. These were not mere suggestions, they were rules backed by the ultimate authority, a hungry creature waiting in the deep. The fear of a monster's reprisal was far more memorable and far more persuasive than any abstract understanding of drowning risks or waterborne illness. It made the danger personal, immediate, and charismatic. Consider the intricate social contract embedded in the story of the Kappa. Its infamous weakness, the need to bow in return and spill the water from its head, is a masterstroke of narrative social engineering. It doesn't just tell you to be polite, it weaponizes politeness. It encodes a core social virtue directly into the mechanism of survival. To defeat the monster, you must perform the very act of respect the culture values most. The lesson is unforgettable because it is tied to a life or death scenario. Similarly, in the traditions of many Australian Aboriginal groups, the Mimi spirits are slender, ancestral beings who live in rock crevices and are sometimes guardians of waterholes. Stories tell that they would bring misfortune or punishment to anyone who took water greedily, polluted a source, or disrupted the delicate balance of the place. This narrative framework effectively established early environmental protection laws. It personified the consequences of ecological harm, ensuring that the community's most vital resource was treated with reverence and care, long before the concept of conservation existed in a modern sense. These myths served as the ultimate child safety warnings. A parent's instruction to stay away from the old mill pond could be easily forgotten, but the tale of the Kelpie, the beautiful horse that would bond to your skin and drag you under, would stick in a child's imagination forever. It translated a complex, invisible danger like a strong undertow or cold water shock into a simple, visceral image, a story that the mind could retrieve instantly at the water's edge. The rules extended to community economics as well. Fishing rights, crucial for a village survival, were often governed by law. Certain pools might be declared the home of a spirit, making them taboo to fish except on specific days or with specific rituals. This prevented overfishing and allowed stocks to recover, a practical management system cloaked in supernatural mandate. By analyzing these stories through this lens, we see their sophisticated utility. They were not primitive superstitions but highly adaptive cultural technologies. They packaged essential survival information, social norms, and environmental ethics into an irresistible, transmissible narrative package. The monster was the enforcement mechanism, a supernatural warden ensuring that the community's unwritten rules were followed, protecting the young, preserving resources, and maintaining social order. This practical terror had a profound legacy, ensuring that the knowledge didn't just survive, it thrived, passed eagerly from one generation to the next around the fire, its lessons carried in the thrilling shape of a creature from the deep. These stories were never meant to be static. Like water itself, they flowed, following the currents of human movement and connection. A terrifying tale told by a fireside in one culture could, over centuries, travel thousands of miles and emerge in a startlingly familiar form in another. This is the journey of folklore migration, where the universal fear of the deep finds new voices in distant lands, and where the collision of belief systems creates entirely new breeds of monster. To understand the global tapestry of aquatic horror, we must trace these pathways of transmission and witness the fascinating process of syncretism, where old gods are reshaped to fit new worlds. One of the clearest examples of this migration is the family of the waterhorse. From the Scottish Kelpie and the more vicious Uisge to the Icelandic Nyker and the Welsh Cephal DW circumflexar, this shape-shifting, child-stealing equine spirit is a hallmark of Celtic and Northern European folklore. Its spread maps directly onto the movements and interactions of Celtic peoples across the Atlantic fringe. Yet, in each new location, the creature adapted. In the rocky, fast-flowing streams of Wales, the Cephal DW circumflexar was often seen as a more fleeting, ghostly apparition that would vanish in a spray of mist. In the colder, deeper lochs of Scotland, the Uisge became a creature of patient, brutal ambush. The core archetype, the deceptive lure that leads to a watery end, remained constant, a portable cautionary tale. But its specific behaviors and habitats were beautifully localized, refined by the unique dangers and landscapes each community knew intimately. This shows that migration is not simple copying, it is creative adaptation. A more profound pattern emerges when we look at the independent birth of similar ideas in cultures that had no possible contact. Consider the dragon. In China, the Long is a benevolent, serpentine river deity, a master of rain and water who brings fertility. In the myths of the Aztecs, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was a god of wind and water, a civilizing force. In Europe, dragons were often cast as malevolent, treasure-hoarding beasts that lurked in caves near water, their fiery breath a perversion of the life-giving spring. These are not stories that traveled along a trade route. They are the result of convergent cultural evolution. When disparate human societies confronted the same awe-inspiring reality, a massive, powerful, unpredictable river, they arrived at a similar symbolic solution, a great, serpentine being that embodied that river's spirit. The shared human experience of relying on and fearing a colossal waterway led to the independent invention of the river dragon, a testament to how our psychology shapes our myths in parallel. Then there is syncretism, the blending of beliefs, which often occurred not through peaceful exchange but through conquest or religious conversion. Here, old monsters do not disappear, they are rebranded. When Christianity spread across Europe, the pagan spirits of springs and rivers did not vanish from the collective imagination. They were often demonized, recast as minions of the devil or as lost souls. The Germanic Nyx, once a capricious but recognized spirit of the water, was frequently transformed into a malevolent tempter, a demon who lured people to spiritual ruin as much as physical drowning. Its haunting music became a siren song leading the faithful astray. This process allowed new belief systems to take root by grafting themselves onto the deep-seated, existing folklore of the land. The old sacred site, now with a new name and a new moral, remained a place of power and caution. This global journey of the water monster, through migration, independent invention, and syncretism, reveals a crucial truth. The core fear is a universal human constant, a deep-seated reaction to the opaque and the drowning deep, but the expression of that fear is endlessly, creatively local. It is shaped by the whisper of reeds in a specific marsh, by the roar of a particular rapid, by the social anxieties of a unique culture, and by the historical currents of contact and change. These stories are alive, evolving with us, reminding us that our maps of the unknown are drawn not just in ink, but in the flowing, adaptable language of shared dread and wonder. To see this principle in its full, chilling detail, we need to step into the stories themselves to meet the icons of this global tradition. Its haunting, gulping cry echoed across the still water of a billabong, a sound that meant one thing: something was out there in the dark. The Bunyip of Australian Aboriginal lore is perhaps the ultimate expression of a water monster shaped entirely by its environment. A being so fluid in form that its true power lies in its refusal to be defined. To understand the Bunyip is to understand a relationship with a land that is both breathtaking and brutally indifferent. This creature did not live in just one lake. It inhabited the very concept of the unknown waterhole across the entire continent, from the tropical wetlands of the north to the dry riverbeds of the interior. Its descriptions are a catalogue of primal unease. Some accounts speak of a beast with the face of a dog, dark fur, flippers, and tusks. Others describe something more avian, with a long neck, a horse-like tail, and a booming call. There are tales of a giant starfish or a serpentine monster. This staggering inconsistency is not a flaw in the myth, it is the myth's core function. The Bunyip was an all-purpose explanation. That strange, sucking noise from the reeds at dusk was the Bunyip. A hunter who failed to return home had encountered the Bunyip. The sudden, treacherous collapse of a riverbank was the work of the Bunyip. In a landscape filled with very real, unique dangers, from venomous snakes to hidden sinkholes, the Bunyip became the single, terrifying answer to a multitude of questions. It was the personification of the Australian wilderness itself, unpredictable, ancient, and deeply sovereign. Within the rich tapestry of Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, which explain the creation and laws of the world, the Bunyip often holds a complex dual role. In some traditions, it is a creator being, one of the ancient ancestral spirits that shaped the waterways in the time before memory. In others, it is a punitive spirit, a guardian that enforces taboos and punishes those who break sacred law or disrespect the land. This duality mirrors the life-giving yet perilous nature of water in an often arid continent, a precious resource that must be approached with profound knowledge and respect. The Bunyip was not merely a monster to be feared, it was a fundamental part of the ecological and spiritual map, a reminder that every water source had a consciousness and a will. When European colonists arrived, they inevitably encountered these stories. Fascinated and terrified by the alien landscape, they seized upon the Bunyip, but they reshaped it to fit their own anxieties. In colonial newspapers and stories, the Bunyip was often used to symbolize the perceived savagery, mystery, and inherent danger of the continent they were trying to conquer. It became a convenient metaphor for everything they did not understand about the land and its original people, a supernatural shorthand for their own cultural dislocation and fear. In this way, the Bunyip transcended its origins to become something rare, a water monster that evolved into a national symbol representing the untamed heart of Australia. Its very ambiguity allowed everyone, indigenous and settler alike, to project their deepest anxieties onto it. The Bunyip shows us how a localized water spirit can grow to embody the soul of an entire continent's wilderness, a shape-shifter whose true form is the collective fear and awe of all who listen to the night sounds near the water. This idea of a creature perfectly adapted to explain a specific, pervasive environmental fear finds a startlingly different, yet equally meticulous, expression on the other side of the world. The Bunyip's terrifying ambiguity stands in stark contrast to the Kappa, a creature defined by an almost comical set of very specific rules. In the rivers and ponds of Japan, this turtle-like humanoid presents a paradox, a being both mischievously polite and lethally dangerous. It is a small, child-sized creature with scaly, reptilian skin, a sharp beak, and most distinctively, a shallow, water-filled depression like a saucer on the top of its head. This saucer is the source of its power and its life. If the water spills out while the Kappa is on land, it becomes weak and immobilized, a vulnerability that is central to its legend. But its threat is very real. It is said to lure people, especially children, into the water to drown them, and folklore speaks of it stealing a mythical organ called the Shirikodama, a ball of life force believed to reside in the anus. Yet for all this menace, the Kappa is not a mindless predator. It operates under a bizarre but strict code of conduct that makes it one of folklore's most fascinating social commentators. It is obsessed with politeness, compelled to return a deep bow. It loves cucumbers more than any other food, and it has a strange passion for sumo wrestling. To understand the Kappa is to see a monster engineered for a highly structured society. On one level, it is the ultimate water safety lesson for children. The story teaches them to be wary of strange figures by the riverbank and to never swim alone, translating a parent's abstract worry into a tangible, memorable creature with a name and a method. But its symbolism runs much deeper. Historians have long noted that some of the earliest descriptions of the Kappa, with its beaked face and what appeared to be a tonsured head, may have been inspired by the first Portuguese missionaries or southern barbarians who arrived in Japan in the 16th century. In this light, the Kappa becomes a personification of the foreign other, a strange being from outside the community with unknown customs and dangerous potential, processed through the familiar lens of a river spirit. More profoundly, the Kappa embodies the dual nature of the river itself in Japanese life. Rivers were the arteries of agriculture, providing essential irrigation for rice paddies, the foundation of society. Yet, they could also transform in an instant into torrents of devastating floods. The Kappa mirrors this duality perfectly. It can be helpful, teaching humans advanced medical techniques or helping irrigate fields in some tales, but it can also be capricious and destructive without warning. Its most brilliant aspect, however, is its defeat. You do not slay a Kappa with a sword or outrun it. You outwit it using the very social fabric it seems to mock. By bowing deeply to it, you trigger its compulsive politeness. It must bow in return, spilling the water from its head saucer and rendering it helpless. You can also bargain with it, offering its favorite food, a cucumber, often inscribed with a family name to ensure safe passage through its domain. This makes the Kappa a unique monster whose weakness is cultural knowledge and etiquette, not brute strength. It is a masterpiece of mythic social engineering, a story that reinforces the supreme importance of politeness and ritual in Japanese society by encoding it as a literal survival skill. The terror of the water is thus filtered through a lens of social order, creating a guardian whose rules must be learned, not just feared. A beautiful black horse stands alone by a rushing river, its coat glistening in the low Scottish light. To a weary traveler, it looks like salvation. This is the Kelpie, perhaps the most iconic of all water horses, a spirit of the fast-flowing streams and fords. Its method is one of deceptive allure. It appears as a lost or tamed steed, allowing a person to mount its back. But once in the saddle, the rider finds their hands stuck fast, bonded to the creature's skin as if by powerful glue. The Kelpie then gallops at terrifying speed into the deepest part of the river, drowning its victim and often devouring the heart. Its domain is the moving water, the place of crossing and transition, and its terror is one of momentum and inescapable capture. Yet in the lore of the Scottish Highlands, there exists a cousin, a being spoken of in even more hushed and fearful tones, the Uisge, pronounced Uisge. This is not a creature of rivers, but of the sea, and most terrifyingly, of deep, still freshwater lochs. While the Kelpie might be satisfied with a drowning, the Uisge is a being of absolute consumption. It shares the shape-shifting nature, often appearing as a fine horse or even a handsome man, but its hunger is insatiable. Stories tell that once it drags a victim beneath the loch's dark surface, it devours every part of them except the liver, which floats back to shore as the only grim testament to their fate. This chilling detail is not mere grotesquerie. It is a masterful narrative reinforcement of the geography of fear. The fast-moving river is a place of action and sudden loss, a body swept away. But the still, deep, silent loch is a place of utter disappearance, of being taken into a quiet, cold void from which nothing returns. The floating liver is the loch's only confession, a single, awful clue in an otherwise perfect crime of nature. These creatures are the manifest spirit of the highlands themselves, a landscape of breathtaking, mist-shrouded beauty that conceals very real and constant danger. The sudden fog that can disorient a walker in minutes, the deceptively solid ground of a peat bog, the icy shock of a mountain stream, all these natural perils are given agency in the form of the shape-shifting water horse. Their ability to appear as a handsome man ties them deeply to the fairy realm, to the Gaelic concept of the Sith, beings who are beautiful, powerful, and dangerously immoral. A charming stranger met by a loch side could be a potential suitor, or he could be the Uisge in disguise, his true nature revealed only when his victim is in his grasp. This transforms the stories from simple monster tales into profound warnings about the peril of trusting enticing surfaces, whether in a person or in a landscape. They taught communities to view both the captivating stranger and the beautiful, calm loch with a foundational wariness, a survival strategy encoded in unforgettable supernatural terms. The narrative function here is clear and direct, a stark caution against the seductive call of the unknown. But what happens when the unknown is not a misty loch, but a historical cataclysm so vast it reshapes the very soul of a people? The next chapter in our understanding of water monsters emerges not from geography but from memory. The loch gives up only a single, terrible clue. But what if the horror is not a memory of the landscape, but a memory of the people? Some of the most chilling water beings are not born from the fear of nature alone, but from the collective trauma of history itself. They are myths that crystallize around sites of profound loss, transforming rivers and lakes into liquid archives of pain, where the monster becomes a persistent, haunting memory of an event a community cannot and perhaps should not forget. Consider the Welsh Afanc, a beast often described as a monstrous beaver or crocodilian creature that dwells in lakes. While it was blamed for causing floods, scholars have suggested a more poignant origin. The name Afanc is linked to the word for beaver, an animal that vanished from Wales centuries ago due to hunting. Could the myth preserve a folk memory of a time when these large, aquatic animals were a common part of the ecosystem, their sudden absence leaving a narrative void filled by a monster? More compellingly, tales of the Afanc are frequently tied to specific lakes like Llyn yr Afanc, which are often located in valleys prone to sudden, catastrophic flooding. The monster becomes a personification of that devastating, inexplicable event, a way to give agency to a natural disaster that reshaped lives and geography. It ensures that the story of the flood and the lessons of where to build and when to flee are passed down through generations, not as a dry weather report, but as a living, breathing danger in the water. This process of encoding history into horror becomes even more potent when the trauma is human in origin. Across the Americas, in regions scarred by the violence of colonial conquest, river monster legends sometimes take on a new, allegorical dimension. While not always a direct one-to-one correlation, scholars note that stories of overwhelming, consuming beings from the water can resonate with memories of an invading force that arrived from the sea, an unstoppable power that upended entire worlds. The monster becomes a symbolic vessel for the trauma of that encounter, a way to process the cataclysm in the metaphorical language the culture already understood. A more direct and heartbreaking example is the legend of La Llorona, the Weeping Woman. While not a traditional monster with scales and claws, she is a foundational spectral being of Latin American folklore, forever tied to riverbanks. Her story varies, but the core is a tale of profound personal tragedy. A woman who, in a moment of madness or vengeance, drowns her own children in a river and is doomed to wander eternally, weeping and searching for them. Her wail is a sound of pure, inconsolable grief, but when we listen closer, her story often intertwines with the historical trauma of the colonial era. Many versions place her as an indigenous woman or a woman of mixed heritage, and her tragic act is frequently linked to a betrayal by a Spanish conquistador or a wealthy landowner. In this reading, La Llorona is more than a ghost story. She becomes a powerful symbol of the suffering, loss, and fractured identity born from that violent period. Her eternal connection to the river marks it as a site of historical memory, where the waters seem to hold the echoes of a profound and collective sorrow. These entities show us that water monsters can be the guardians of history, especially histories too painful to speak of directly. They ensure that a community remembers not just the where and when of a tragedy, but the raw emotional truth of it. The landscape itself becomes a monument, and the creature is the story that gives that monument a voice, a chilling, necessary reminder that some waters run deep with more than just water. This profound emotional weight, this ability to channel both primal fear and deep sorrow, is precisely why these aquatic beings have flowed so powerfully from folklore into the heart of our modern imagination. That lingering sorrow by the riverbank finds a new home in the gallery and on the page. The journey of the water monster from whispered campfire tale to celebrated subject of art and literature is a testament to its profound grip on the human imagination. These beings did not remain in the oral tradition. They flowed into every medium we have created to explore our fears, proving their archetype was not bound to any one era. In classical Japanese art, the Kappa was immortalized by masters like Hokusai, not as a mere monster, but as a complex figure within a detailed social and natural world. His woodblock prints show the Kappa interacting with humans, sometimes in conflict, sometimes in bizarre camaraderie, capturing its role as a capricious but integral part of the spiritual ecosystem. This artistic treatment elevated the creature from folklore to a cultural icon, its image carrying layers of meaning about the relationship between society and the wild. Across the world, European Romantic painters of the 18th and 19th centuries were obsessed with the sublime power of nature, and water spirits were a perfect subject. Paintings of nymphs and naiads by artists like John William Waterhouse are breathtakingly beautiful, yet they often carry a palpable, unsettling undertone. The viewer senses these beings are not entirely safe. Their beauty is a lure, a manifestation of nature's enchanting and indifferent power. The art captures the duality perfectly, making the terror aesthetically compelling. This transition to the written word allowed for even deeper exploration. In American literature, Mark Twain did not write about monsters, but he masterfully conveyed the Mississippi River as a living, willful, and ominously powerful character. In works like Life on the Mississippi, the river is a vast, ancient, and unpredictable entity, holding secrets and dangers in its muddy depths. It is a force that commands respect and fear, a direct descendant of the capricious river gods of old. Then, in the 20th century, authors like H.P. Lovecraft tapped directly into the primal source of aquatic horror. His stories are filled with ancient, sleeping beings from the deep sea, like Cthulhu, whose very existence mocks human significance. Lovecraft's genius was to fuse the fear of the deep with a cosmic dread, suggesting that the monsters in our water are not just local hazards, but remnants of a terrifying, alien history that predates humanity itself. His work proves the archetype's flexibility, scaling the fear from the personal to the existential. The silver screen provided the perfect medium to bring these submerged fears to visceral life. The 1950s creature feature, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, is a direct bridge from ancient myth to modern anxiety. Here, the monster is a prehistoric survivor, a gill man discovered in a remote Amazonian lagoon. The film plays on classic themes, the creature as a territorial guardian, the danger of intruding into a primordial realm, and the terror of the amphibious grab from below. It packaged the ancient fear of the water guardian into the new context of mid-century exploration and scientific curiosity. Decades later, cinema began to reinterpret the archetype with more nuance. Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water brilliantly inverts the formula. The aquatic being is not a monster, but a victim, a sacred entity captured and tortured by human arrogance and cruelty. The film uses the familiar imagery of the river monster to ask questions about otherness, compassion, and what we deem monstrous, showing the symbol's power to evolve with our social conscience. Similarly, the folk horror resurgence in films like The Ritual returns the creature to its ancient, wooded origins. The being in that film, an indirect offspring of Norse mythology, is a god of the forest, a primal, antlered entity that demands sacrifice. It is a reminder that these old gods of stream and wood never left. They simply waited for our stories to circle back to them. This artistic evolution from print to canvas to film demonstrates the water monster's incredible adaptability. Each generation finds a new language for the same deep-seated fear, recontextualizing the creature to reflect its own anxieties, from colonial encounters and scientific exploration to issues of environmental ethics and societal alienation. The archetype survives because it is a blank canvas upon which we can project our changing understanding of the unknown. And in our modern, connected world, that projection has taken on a new, electrifying form, transforming from a subject of fiction into a global, communal pursuit. The search is no longer confined to local lore, it has gone digital. The same primal urge that painted monsters on cave walls now powers sonar sweeps across dark lochs. In the 20th century, this ancient impulse found a new name, cryptozoology, the formal search for animals whose existence remains unverified by mainstream science. And at the very heart of this modern mythology sits the queen of them all, the Loch Ness Monster. Nessie is more than a story, she is an industry, a global icon, and the perfect emblem of our enduring need for the unknown. The cultural conditions that birthed the modern Nessie phenomenon are telling. The first major wave of sightings in the 1930s coincided with a world grappling with the Great Depression and the looming shadow of another global war. In an era of profound uncertainty and disenchantment, the idea of a prehistoric survivor in a Scottish loch offered a pure, thrilling dose of wonder. It was a mystery untouched by politics or economics, a reminder that the world could still hold majestic secrets. This allure was quickly harnessed by the nascent tourism industry. The monster became a brand, a reason to visit a remote part of Scotland, transforming local economics and creating a feedback loop where the search itself became the attraction. The tools of the hunt evolved with the times. Where once a community might rely on whispered testimony, the modern seeker employs technology. Blurry photographs, underwater sonar images showing ambiguous blips, and grainy videos became the new evidence, the digital age's answer to the fisherman's tale of a log that moved. These tools gave the quest a veneer of scientific legitimacy, framing an ancient longing within the language of modern discovery. Yet it is crucial to differentiate between the literal and the symbolic in this pursuit. For many, the goal is the undeniable proof of a physical, biological creature. But for a far larger audience, the true value lies in the search itself. The ongoing mystery preserves a sense of majesty in nature. It declares that not everything is catalogued, that wilderness can still hold surprises that defy our Google Maps understanding of the world. This taps into a deep psychological need, what enthusiasts call the Fortean after researcher Charles Fort, a hunger for events that defy easy categorization, for anomalies that crack the mundane surface of reality. And a deep, cold lake is the perfect theater for such anomalies. Environmental conditions conspire to create mystery. Temperature inversions can create superior mirages, making a floating log or a swimming deer appear monstrously large. Seismic activity or decaying plant matter can release large bubbles of gas, creating the illusion of something massive rising from the depths. And very real, large animals like sturgeon or Greenland sharks, venturing into unusual waters, can provide a biological core for a legendary sighting. The lake, with its inherent opacity and capacity for optical tricks, remains the ultimate collaborator in the myth. The modern hunt, with its submarines and DNA sampling, proves that the impulse to populate the deep with monsters is not a relic. It is a living tradition. We have not outgrown the need, we have simply upgraded our methods. The creature in the lake, whether called Nessie, Champ, or Ogopogo, serves a vital function. It is a placeholder for wonder, a communal project that keeps the edges of our maps softly blurred. And within that blurred margin, within the very persistence of the search, lies a clue that these stories were never just about monsters. They were whispers from the water, carrying a message we are only now learning to hear in its original, urgent tongue. The search for Nessie is a quest for wonder, but the oldest water monster stories were born from a far more practical need: survival. Long before the terms ecology or conservation existed, our ancestors were encoding its fundamental laws into the bodies of their most terrifying tales. These creatures were not just predators, they were the original environmental protectors, mythical enforcers of a balance we are only now relearning. Revisit the Vodianoi, that grumpy Slavic river spirit. His anger was not random. Folklore warned that if you polluted his waters with waste or treated his domain with disrespect, he would grow furious and abandon the river. And when the Vodianoi left, the river itself would sicken and dry up. This is not a simple ghost story. It is a precise cause and effect narrative about watershed health. The monster's presence signifies a thriving ecosystem. His absence spells ecological collapse. The story personifies the invisible connection between human action and environmental consequence, making it unforgettable. Or consider the Kappa once more. Its dual nature is perfectly ecological. In some tales, it assists farmers by showing them better methods for irrigation, a direct representation of water as a life-giving resource. Yet it also drowns those who are wasteful or disrespectful at the river's edge. This is a mythic expression of sustainable use, the idea that the resource provides, but only if you follow its rules. These narratives served as a powerful, pre-scientific form of traditional ecological knowledge. By giving the river a consciousness and a temper, the stories created a cultural incentive for stewardship. You did not avoid polluting because of an abstract concept. You did it because you feared the Vodianoi's wrath. You took only what you needed from the water because you respected the Kappa's domain. The monster was the guardian of the entire watershed, its well-being a direct reflection of the environment's health. This ancient perspective is finding startling new relevance today. Modern environmental movements, especially those focused on river rights and conservation, are consciously reaching back into this mythic toolkit. There is a growing effort to grant legal personhood to rivers, recognizing them as living entities with rights, much like the corporate personhood granted to companies. This is not so different from the ancient belief in a river god. Campaigns to protect threatened waterways will sometimes invoke the local water spirit or monster, framing the conservation fight not as a technical issue, but as a defense of a sacred being's home. The monster shifts from a foe to be slain by a hero to a symbol to be protected by a community. This reframing offers a powerful way to re-engage with these old stories. It allows us to see them not as primitive superstitions, but as sophisticated narrative technology for survival. They were early warning systems, crafted in the language of terror to ensure that the lesson stuck. When we listen to them now, we hear the voices of our ancestors trying to tell us something urgent about limits, balance, and reciprocity. They understood that to harm the water was to awaken something within it, a force of retribution that wore the face of their deepest fears. In giving that force a name and a shape, they made the invisible connections of nature visible and therefore negotiable. This final layer of meaning brings us to the ultimate question these stories pose, one that is not about the monsters in the water, but about the reflection they hold up to us. That reflection in the dark water is not just a monster, it is a potential future self. The ultimate terror these beings evoke may not be of an external predator, but of an internal unraveling, the fear that the civilized person gazing into the abyss could become the abyss itself. Water, in its formless, boundaryless nature, becomes the perfect metaphor for the parts of ourselves we struggle to contain: our primal instincts, our repressed desires, the raw, immoral energy that civilization works tirelessly to keep submerged. The monster from the deep is, in a profound sense, the ID unleashed, the chaotic self that threatens to dissolve the ordered identity we present to the world. We see this fear of transformation etched into folklore across Europe. In French-Canadian legends, the loup-garou, a werewolf-like being, is sometimes cursed to haunt waterways, its transformation a punishment for a moral failing or a pact broken. This is not a random monster in the woods, it is a human soul undone, its humanity drowned by its own savage nature, forever tied to the liquid threshold between worlds. Similarly, the haunting call of the Rusalka or the Nyx does not just lure victims to a physical death. Stories tell of those who hear their songs and survive but are never the same. They are left in a state of perpetual melancholy or madness, their minds unmoored, as if a part of their own psyche had been pulled into the current and lost. The danger is not merely drowning, but a loss of self, a psychic dissolution where the boundary between human consciousness and the mindless flow of the water erodes. The philosopher Julia Kristeva explored a concept that resonates powerfully here, the idea of the abject. The abject is that which violently disturbs our sense of identity, system, and order. It is the visceral reaction we have to things that remind us of our own materiality and mortality, often associated with bodily fluids, blood, waste, and crucially, the ambiguous nature of water. Water is life-giving and cleansing, yet it is also the medium of decay and dissolution. When we look into dark, still water, we are confronting the abject. Our own reflection is there, but it is unstable, ready to be broken apart by a rising shape from below. The water monster embodies this abject horror. It is the formless thing that threatens to break down the clean categories we live by: human versus beast, clean versus unclean, self versus other. To confront it is to risk being reabsorbed into a chaotic state we have spent millennia building cultures to escape. This is why these stories carry such a deep, lingering chill. They tap into a universal anxiety about maintaining our humanity in the face of overwhelming natural forces and internal pressures. The rituals we discussed, the offerings to river spirits, the taboos about swimming at certain times, can be seen as collective ceremonies designed to manage this internal chaos. By performing a respectful ritual at the water's edge, a community isn't just appeasing an external spirit. It is reinforcing the social contract, performing the behaviors that distinguish the civilized human from the primal beast. It is a way of saying we acknowledge the chaos within and without, but we choose order. We choose to bow, to offer the cucumber, to whisper the prayer. These acts are a bulwark against the silent pull of the deep, both in the landscape and in the soul. The water monster, therefore, completes a profound circle. It begins as an explanation for a drowning, evolves into a guardian of a resource, migrates across continents, and endures in modern art. But at its most essential, it is a story we tell about the cost of being human. It is the shadow self we project onto the deep, a warning that the journey into the unknown always carries the risk of never fully returning, of being changed into something that no longer recognizes its own reflection. And in that warning lies a strange comfort, a shared acknowledgement of the fragile vessel we all sail in, on waters much deeper than we know. Fear gave the monster its form, but ritual gave humanity a voice. Across the world, the response to these aquatic terrors was not always flight or fight. Often, it was a careful, deliberate negotiation. Communities developed intricate ceremonies and offerings, moving from a state of pure dread to one of formalized propitiation, a sacred bargain with the lords of the water. This shift transformed the monster from an indiscriminate force of chaos into a being with preferences, a temper that could be soothed, and a favor that could be earned. The relationship became transactional, a precarious balance struck through ritual. In Japan, this takes the form of the Kappa Matsuri, festivals still held in some towns near rivers. Here, the Kappa is not a demon to be exorcised, but a capricious neighbor to be appeased. The central offering is its favorite food, the cucumber. Families will inscribe their names on cucumbers and cast them into the water, a direct request for safety, for the protection of their children when they swim, and for a bountiful harvest from waters the Kappa is believed to influence. The ritual acknowledges the creature's power and its right to the domain, while seeking to harness its potential for community benefit. It formalizes the fear into a respectful, even playful, annual dialogue. A similar, though more solemn, seasonal negotiation unfolds in Slavic traditions during Rusalnaya week. This is the time when the Rusalki, the spirits of young women who met their end in water, are believed to be most active, leaving their river homes to dance in forest groves. To ensure their benevolence and to plead for a good harvest, villagers would leave offerings for them at the water's edge, woven garlands, pieces of cloth, or bits of food. These were not bribes, but gifts of remembrance and respect, an acknowledgement of the spirit's sorrow and their continued connection to the community's fertility and well-being. To ignore the ritual was to risk the Rusalki's wrath, which could manifest as drowned crops or sudden illness. The most dramatic form of this negotiation, however, is the sacrificial offering. The concept of the scapegoat, a symbolic bearer of a community's ills, finds a direct parallel in water rituals. From ancient times, there are accounts of valuable objects, animals, or in some traditions, symbolic human effigies being cast into rivers, lakes, or whirlpools. This was done to satisfy a hungry spirit or deity, to atone for a perceived transgression, or to avert a coming disaster like a flood. The offering was a payment, a life for a life, or a treasure for safety, thrown into the liquid abyss to maintain the cosmic balance. Localized folk traditions across Europe and Asia preserved echoes of this practice for centuries, with fishermen making small offerings before a season, or travelers tossing a coin into a treacherous ford. These rituals reveal a sophisticated and humbling worldview. They formalize the human-monster relationship, creating a system of etiquette for interacting with the wild. This perspective does not see humanity as separate from or superior to nature, but as one participant in a constant, delicate dialogue with its personified forces. The monster is a sovereign, and the rituals are the tribute and the treaty. This stands in stark contrast to the later, more familiar narratives of conquest, where the hero's goal is to seek out and slay the beast. The older model is not about eradication, but about coexistence. It is a recognition that some powers are too great to destroy, and that the goal is not victory, but a sustainable, if tense, peace. This ancient dialogue of offering and appeasement asks us a profound question about our own place in the world, a question that becomes unavoidable when the stories themselves begin to fade. But that sacred bargain of ritual and offering was not the only story our ancestors told. A different, more defiant narrative began to rise, one where the hero did not bow or bargain, but drew a sword. Hercules faced the Hydra in the swamps of Lerna. St. George confronted his dragon by a lake, its breath fouling the water and the air. In Welsh legend, the knight Peredur was summoned to a kingdom plagued by a terrible shriek every night, a sound traced to an afanc, a monstrous beast in a lake that was causing devastating floods. These are not tales of coexistence, they are stories of conquest. They mark a profound shift in the human psyche, a declaration that the monster would not be managed but mastered. The wild water and the chaos it represented would be brought to heel. The hero in these myths acts as an agent of civilization itself. His victory is not personal glory, but a communal necessity. The Hydra poisoned the springs of Lerna, making the water undrinkable and the land barren. St. George's dragon demanded human sacrifices, paralyzing a community with fear. The afanc's thrashing caused floods that destroyed homes and fields. The monster is no longer a sovereign spirit to be respected. It is an obstruction to human progress, a literal blockage in the landscape that must be removed. This narrative shift mirrors a tangible change in human history, the rise of large-scale agriculture and settled societies. To farm reliably, you need predictable water. Swamps needed to be drained for farmland. Rivers needed to be channeled for irrigation. The unpredictable, life-giving yet destructive force of water had to be controlled. The myth of slaying the water monster is the symbolic act of that control. It represents the triumph of human-imposed order over natural chaos, of cultivated fields over untamed marshes, of the safety of the walled town over the perils of the wild shore. Yet look closer at these victories and you will see they are rarely clean or complete. Hercules found that for every head of the Hydra he cut off, 2 more grew back. His triumph required a change in tactics, using fire to cauterize the wounds and help from his nephew. The victory was messy, collaborative, and hard-won. In many versions of St. George's tale, after the dragon is slain, the entire town converts to Christianity, and the creature's body is carted away by oxen. The monster is not just killed, its influence is systematically removed and its territory sanctified for a new, human-centered order. The story of Peregia and the Afanc is particularly telling. The knight does not simply fight the beast in the lake. He uses cunning, enchanted chains provided by the king's daughters to lure and bind it, and then a team of oxen haul it from the water where it is slain. The monster is literally extracted from its element, rendered powerless on land, and eliminated. These complications and the sheer effort involved reveal a deep-seated anxiety within the triumph. The stories acknowledge that dominating nature is not easy. The chaos fights back, the Hydra multiplies its threats, the dragon's lair is a place of terror. The Afanc's removal requires magical tools and immense physical labor. There is a whispered question in these myths: what do we lose when we win? When we drain the swamp and slay its guardian, do we also drain away something vital, some wild majesty or sacred balance? The hero's hard-fought victory symbolizes humanity's growing power, but also foreshadows the unintended consequences of that power, a theme that would travel through the centuries, all the way to our own relationship with the planet. The monster did not vanish when the marsh was paved over. It simply learned to swim in concrete. In our age of skyscrapers and streetlights, the ancient archetype of the water horror has undergone a startling migration, abandoning the wilderness for the urban jungle. The modern legends, the digital campfire tales we call creepypasta, reveal a creature perfectly adapted to its new habitat, the man-made water feature. Here, the terror is not of a wild river, but of a chlorinated community pool that feels wrong after dark, or the unsettling echo in an empty municipal reservoir. The archetype has traded scales for something that reflects our newest fears. Consider the enduring legend of the alligator in the sewer. This story, which proliferated in 20th century New York and other major cities, is a masterpiece of urban horror. It takes the primordial reptile, the classic monster of the swamp, and relocates it into the very bowels of human infrastructure. The narrative suggests that our civilized world is just a thin layer over a forgotten, feral one. The sewers become a new kind of wild, a dark, networked ecosystem where the rules of nature still apply, waiting to breach the surface. This legend speaks directly to anxieties about what we have buried, both literally and metaphorically, and the fear that it might come back. Similarly, online forums are filled with stories about haunted swimming pools or water towers, places where something in the chemically treated water seems to watch or even mimic the swimmers. These tales update the siren's call for a recreational setting, transforming a space of leisure into one of latent dread. The water is no longer a natural force, but a controlled, contained utility, and the horror lies in the suggestion that our control is an illusion. This adaptability is brilliantly demonstrated in localized modern myths, like the so-called Chicago Mothman, a winged humanoid entity repeatedly sighted near the city's bridges and waterways. While not a traditional water beast, its consistent association with points of crossing over water ties it directly to the ancient role of the threshold guardian. It is a new sentinel for old geography, appearing where the human landscape of steel and concrete meets the enduring, flowing power of the river. Other stories speak of giant, mutated creatures in polluted rivers, grotesque products of industrial waste. These are not spirits of the water, they are its victims, transformed by human negligence into avenging monsters. They embody our deep-seated guilt about environmental damage, the fear that the toxins we dump will come back to us reshaped and hostile. The polluted river monster is a powerful symbol of consequence, a biological feedback loop wearing the face of a nightmare. What these modern iterations reveal is that the core function of the myth remains intact, even as its skin changes. The urban water monster continues to explain the inexplicable, to personify systemic dangers, and to guard thresholds. The fear is no longer of a wild nature, but of nature's uncanny return within the city, of infrastructure failing, of the past resurfacing. It reflects anxieties about pollution, about the fragility of the systems we depend on, and about the eerie emptiness of controlled spaces after hours. The persistence of this trope in our digital age proves that our psychological need for these stories is undiminished. We still require a language for our collective unease, and the monster, in its infinite adaptability, provides the perfect vocabulary. It prompts a final, compelling consideration. If the story is so persistent, might it be pointing toward a truth that exists outside the story itself? Our brain is a relentless pattern-making machine, wired for survival in a world of potential threats. This neurological imperative is the final, crucial ingredient in the monster-making recipe, the reason why two people can look at the same ripple on a lake and one sees a fish while the other is certain they have glimpsed the serpent. The science of perception reveals that our own senses are the most prolific creators of water monsters, providing a tangible, experiential basis for the legends that feels utterly real. This begins with a fundamental cognitive shortcut called pareidolia. It is our brain's tendency to impose a familiar image, especially a face or a body, onto random or ambiguous visual data. In the dappled light of a forest stream, a floating log becomes a resting crocodile. The tangled mass of drifting water weeds takes on the sinuous shape of a coiled eel. The play of moonlight on choppy water sketches the humps of a great beast. Our mind, desperate to make sense of the unknown, fills in the blanks, and it does so with the images our culture has already provided. It is not lying to us, it is trying to help using the only templates it has. Light itself conspires with our neurology to deceive us. Water is a master of distortion. When light passes from air into water, it bends, a process called refraction. This makes objects submerged in water appear larger, closer, and oddly misshapen. A large, familiar animal like a seal or an otter, viewed from the bank through the warping lens of the water's surface, can be transformed into something alien and enormous. Its true proportions are lost, its movements rendered strange and jerky. This effect is compounded by a visual puzzle known as size, distance, ambiguity. On land, our brain uses a wealth of cues, like the clarity of detail and the convergence of parallel lines, to judge how far away something is and therefore how big it is. On a featureless expanse of water, especially in fog or low light, those cues vanish. A bird floating 30 meters away could be a small bird nearby or a gigantic creature much farther out. Without a reference point, our brain must guess, and in a state of heightened alertness, it often guesses monster. Environmental conditions set the stage for this sensory drama. Fog does not just obscure, it actively sculpts the unseen. It muffles sound, narrows vision to a small, moving circle, and bleeds color from the world. In this muted, monochrome space, every shadow gains weight and every faint noise seems deliberate. A loon's call becomes a mournful wail. The splash of a jumping fish is the slap of a giant tail. The stage is perfectly set for the mind's projection. Then there is the powerful force of expectation. Psychologists understand that what we believe shapes what we see. If you have grown up hearing that a particular bend in the river is where the spirit dwells, if every story around the campfire has primed you to see a creature, your brain enters a state of hyper-vigilance. It is actively scanning the environment for confirmation. In that state, an ambiguous stimulus is not ambiguous at all. It is proof. The circular wave from a rising fish becomes the wake of something massive moving just below the surface. The dark patch of lily pads becomes a lurking form. Your perception is guided by narrative, creating a feedback loop where the myth generates the very evidence that seems to confirm it. This scientific deconstruction does not rob the legends of their power. It deepens our awe for the human experience. It shows that the monster is not always an external fiction, but sometimes an internal creation. A collaboration between a mysterious world and a brain exquisitely tuned to find meaning and threat in the shadows. The chill you feel is real. The quickening heartbeat is real. The vision, however fleeting, was real to you. This means that for countless people throughout history, the encounter with the water monster was not a mere story they heard, but something they sincerely believed they witnessed with their own eyes. Their testimony was given in perfect honesty. The legend provided the template, and their own magnificent pattern-seeking neurology provided the vivid, unforgettable picture. It confirms that the fear of the deep is not just cultural, it is biological, a part of our sensory and cognitive operating system. We are literally built to see monsters in the water, because in a world of hidden predators and unseen drop-offs, it was always safer to see a monster that wasn't there than to miss the one that was. These shared threads across continents are not coincidences. They form a kind of narrative grammar, a universal storybook where different cultures have written their own chapters using the same basic vocabulary of fear and awe. When we step back to compare, we see four profound themes that repeat like a chorus in every corner of the world. The first is the most direct, the monster as the cause of drowning. From the Scottish Kelpie to the Icelandic Nyka, these beings do not just live in the water, they actively claim lives, personifying the moment a person slips beneath the surface and does not return. The second thread is deception, often through a beautiful or helpful form. The water horse that seems like a tame steed, the lovely woman by the shore whose song is a lure. These stories teach that the most dangerous thing in the water may not look dangerous at all. It is a warning written in the language of enticement. Third is the deep connection to the water's life-giving power. These creatures are frequently tied to the health of the source itself. Anger them and the river might dry up or flood. Appease them and the fish might be plentiful and the crops nourished. They are the mythic embodiment of a simple, terrifying truth. If the water suffers, we suffer. Finally, there is the universal role of the guardian. Whether it is the Ojibwe mishypeshu, a great lynx or serpent of the deep copper-lined lakes, or the bunyip in its billabong, these beings are not random trespassers. They are presented as the ancient owners, the sovereign spirits of that particular spring, river, or lake. To take water without acknowledgement is to steal from them. This comparative view reveals something beautiful and humbling. While the specific details of the monster, its name, its exact shape, are wonderfully unique to each culture, the core narrative is strikingly convergent. A community living by a great lake in North America and a tribe navigating the billabongs of Australia with no possible contact, both arrived at the same symbolic conclusion. They both envisioned a powerful, often composite animal spirit that ruled the waters, demanded respect, and explained both bounty and tragedy. This is not evidence of a single ancient myth that spread, but of the human mind independently arriving at the same symbolic solutions when faced with the same existential equation. Water equals life, water equals death. How do we explain that duality? We create a being that embodies it. We give the mystery a face, a set of rules, and a story. This convergent mythology tells us that our ancestors were not just telling local ghost stories. They were engaging in a fundamental human activity, using narrative to map their relationship with the most vital and volatile element in their world. They were crafting a shared language of caution, reverence, and understanding, a language spoken in the same essential symbols from the frozen north to the sun-baked outback. It is a reminder that before we had science to explain currents and ecology, we had stories to contain the wonder and the warning. And in listening to this global chorus of tales, we hear the echo of our own deepest selves, still drawn to the water's edge, still peering into the reflection, and still wondering what, if anything, is looking back. That reflection in the dark water is a story we have been telling for as long as we have had language. Its power endures not as a relic, but as a living response to permanent human conditions. The first and most fundamental reason is the element itself. Water is the ultimate paradox, the source of life and a constant, silent threat. As long as we need to drink, to travel, to live by its shores, we will harbor this ambivalent awe. The myth gives that tension a face, turning an impersonal, essential force into a being we can comprehend, and in comprehending, feel we might somehow negotiate with. It transforms a landscape feature into a character in our shared story. These tales also provide an irreplaceable narrative container for experiences that defy simple explanation. Before modern medicine or physics, how does a community process a sudden drowning, a mysterious illness from the river, or a flood that sweeps away homes? The human mind rejects randomness. It seeks cause, intention, and meaning. The water monster provides all three. It turns senseless tragedy into a story with a villain, a sequence of events, and often a moral about respect or caution. This narrative framework does not erase grief, but it helps a community carry it, weaving their loss and their warnings into the very geography of their world. Flexibility is the secret to their immortality. A story about a Kelpie is never just about a Kelpie. Across centuries, it has been a child safety lesson, a social commentary on deceptive strangers, an environmental parable about respecting wild places, and a psychological exploration of our fear of being consumed. The archetype is a vessel, empty and waiting to be filled with whatever a culture fears or values most. It can warn of pollution, symbolize historical trauma, or critique social alienation, all while keeping its classic, chilling shape. This adaptability ensures the story never becomes obsolete. It simply finds new water to inhabit. Beyond their practical function, these myths satisfy a profound aesthetic hunger, our longing for the sublime. There is a terrifying beauty in a storm-lashed lake or a mist-shrouded river at dawn, a feeling that is both awe and dread. The philosopher Edmund Burke defined the sublime as the feeling we get in the face of overwhelming natural power, a delightful horror. The water monster is the personification of that feeling. It gives a tangible form to the thrilling chill we feel when we stand at the edge of a great, dark body of water, reminding us that nature is not just pretty, it is majestic, indifferent, and deeply powerful. The story allows us to taste that fear from a safe distance, to marvel at the grandeur of the unknown. Ultimately, these stories are a thread through time. When you hear a tale of the Bunyip or the Vodianoi, you are not just hearing a spooky legend. You are listening to the voice of 1,000 ancestors, a direct line to the moment they stood by their own water's edge, felt that same primal chill, and tried to make sense of it. The specific fears may change, but the wonder does not. In a world increasingly mapped, measured, and explained by data, these preserved mysteries are a vital counterweight. They defend a small, essential territory of the unknown. They remind us that some questions are more valuable than their answers, and that a respectful fear of the deep, both in the world and within the human heart, is not a weakness but a form of wisdom. It is the understanding that some depths are meant to be acknowledged, not conquered, to be pondered in stories told by firelight, forever reflecting our own image back to us from the dark. Our journey through these stories is not a trip into fantasy, but a map of the human soul. From the misty lochs of Scotland to the digital currents of our modern fears, one truth emerges with startling clarity. The monsters we placed in rivers and lakes were never just monsters. They are profound, living reflections of our own relationship with the most vital element on Earth. For millennia, these beings have done the essential work of the human imagination. They gave a face to the formless dread of the deep, explaining the sudden loss of a child or the fury of a flood. They enforced the rules of the community, teaching caution, respect, and social order through unforgettable narrative. They stood as sovereign guardians of their domains, reminding us that the water was not a passive resource, but a conscious force with its own rights and temper. They even became vessels for our deepest psychological shadows, externalizing our fears of losing control, of being transformed, of being consumed by chaos. These creatures were born at a powerful intersection, where local geography met universal psychology, where ancestral memory met the need for a good story. We may no longer leave cucumbers for the Kappa or whisper prayers to the Vodyanoi, but the archetype they represent has not vanished, it has simply evolved. It now warns us of pollution in the form of mutated river beasts, and it guards the thresholds of our urban landscapes in sewer legends and eerie poolside tales. The fundamental dialogue remains, a negotiation between humanity and the mysterious, life-giving power of water. In an age of mounting water crises, where rivers run dry and oceans rise, these ancient stories speak to us with renewed urgency. They are not primitive superstitions, but a forgotten language of reverence. They encoded a wisdom we are struggling to relearn, that to harm the water is to awaken a retribution from the deep. The monster was the symbol of that consequence, so the next time you find yourself by the water's edge, pause for a moment. Look past your own reflection on the still surface. See the deeper reflection there, the accumulated weight of countless generations who stood where you stand, feeling that same mix of awe and unease. In that dark mirror, you see the entire human story, our fears, our creativity, our desperate need to understand, and our enduring, fragile pact with the source of all life. The question these myths leave us with is not whether something is down there, but what we are willing to see. What part of ourselves, of our history, of our responsibility, is reflected back.